Assalamu alaikum, guys. Welcome back to this week's episode.
Episode 7, which is crazy. I hope you all recovered from our movie of an episode last time.
This week, we will kind of be going deeper into the topic of Islamic schools and public schools and our experiences with it. We felt like we did go into it quite deeply last week, but we also found that there were some questions people had and that there were topics that we kind of wanted to go into and disclaimers that we also wanted to give.
Of course. So just starting off with the disclaimer itself, our last week's episode was just, it was just to shed some light on the experience that a lot of girls and guys go through in Islamic schools, and the only reason we put it out there was for improvement. We're pro-Islamic schools. We want people to go to Islamic schools, and we want Islamic schools to improve so that future generations can have that safe space. But you can't do that without sharing your experiences and the harsh reality of what it came with. And I'm glad that, we've been getting so much support and love for the episode. And inshallah, Islamic schools take into consideration everybody's experience and hopefully improve for the better.
It was really just a conversation that we wanted to open up because we noticed a lack of it almost, as in we didn't really hear many people talking about it, and that's why we kind of wanted to bring light to the whole topic. Mm-hmm. This week we're gonna be diving into public schools and our experience with it, as well as addressing questions that our supporters came up with.
So just our transition, a bit about our back and forth between public and private school. Khadija and I went to a public school from JK up until me grade 5 and Khadija grade 6, I believe.
I stayed in public school till grade 5, and then grade 6 I started in Islamic school.
Yeah, okay, so we started at the same time, and then we also started public high school at the same time, so I started in grade 9 and so did Khadija.
And so did I.
So we definitely have
there's that little break in the middle.
Yeah.
But we did end up going back to public schools.
Me and Khadija also went to the same elementary school, so I feel like we're going to be able to relate on a lot of things because we kind of experienced it together. The demographic was the same, the people were the same.
We were never in the same class because there is that year difference. Yeah. But other than that, I feel like we did share a lot of experiences, and then in high school it did kind of differ because you did move away and we did go to different high schools in different cities.
Yeah, my city was a bit more white. It was predominantly white. It's now different, obviously, with the GTA you never know, but Khadija's school is predominantly
I honestly feel like I'm going to school in Pakistan. I walk down the halls and I hear people talking about what vape flavor they like in Urdu, right? So I literally feel like I'm in Pakistan.
Yeah. So just starting off, we went to public school pretty early on in the 21st century, if that makes sense. I mean, yeah, we started in 2009. We went to kindergarten in public school, and we both were pretty new to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had been there for about a year, and
yeah, about same. Yeah,
so we were learning English and learning to read at the same time, all in the same school, and I feel like I didn't see much Muslim representation amongst teachers at that time, and I just didn't feel like I belonged for a long time, especially in my elementary phase, just 1 to 5. I didn't feel like Muslims were represented at all at our school. I remember we had one teacher in grade 1, and her last name was Mrs. Khan, and she was my favorite teacher, even though she never taught me.
I remember her.
And it was just because I knew that she was Muslim. That's the only reason that she was my favorite teacher, even though she never taught me. So I feel like that underrepresentation really makes kids feel, out of place, and as though their culture is kind of not the, majority or the, predominant culture in the school.
Even beyond, just Muslims, I remember, I had that same teacher in grade 2, and then going on, I didn't have a black teacher until grade 11.
Yeah.
Right? So even beyond just Muslim representation, within staff. We're looking at just like any representation of really colored people.
Yeah.
Because you can see it within the student body, but you don't see it within the staff.
True. That's true.
So it's like, okay, you're like boasting about your diversity, but you're not representing it within the people that you hire to teach these people, because these people who are white are bringing their views in to teach a bunch of like Muslims and Arabs and like all of these different people.
Asian kids.
So
we had so many Asians in our school too. With that like ideology of like that white culture, I feel like so many things were normalized at our school that like we had that initial culture shock from like back home and what we, you know, what we're raised as in our households, and then school. Like, that was a complete culture shock for me, at least, because I felt like, wow, we do not do that at home. Especially, like, when we first came to Canada, we were a bit more, like, strict with, you know, the way that we instilled our culture. So things like...
Because they tried to hold on to it,
They tried to hold on to it. And also, like, you'd never know. Your kid is, like, starting off in kindergarten at a public school, so they're...
Our parents took, like, a very big risk.
Yeah, big risk. So, like, things like music class, for example, like I remember they gave us like recorders, and I was like, oh my god, how am I gonna take this home? Like, it was not allowed for me to play it at home, and I couldn't practice at home because my mom would be like, it's haram, and it is haram. But like as a kid, I was like stuck between, okay, but like everybody at school does it, and then at home like we don't listen to music, so like where's that in between, you know?
There was also there was like that disparity between what our parents were teaching us at home, and then when you send your kid to school for 6 to 8 hours a day, you're basically letting someone else almost raise your kid, right? Because you're sending them there like 5 days a week for 6 to 8 hours a day. Whereas if you were to send your kids to school back home, you know that these people carry the same values as you and all of that, and the same religion.
And that's where I feel like Islamic school, like we talked about the professionalism in Islamic school, and that's where I think that plays in, because in Islamic school they know your culture, they know, you know, the background, and they know your ethnicity, and all that all comes to play when making decisions at school, when like doing anything at school. So it's not that big of a shock, or it doesn't leave you in between.
Yeah, it doesn't leave you confused. I feel like with the fact that I went to Islamic school for those years, I feel like it kind of helped me develop my moral compass for when I went to like public high school, right? For me, it was very like I never got caught up in the things that like people who went to public school their whole lives got caught up in, right? Such as like if it's like vaping, smoking, boys, dressing in a certain way, that can all be your choice, but that doesn't align with Islamic morals, values in the end. And I did, alhamdulillah, that is one thing that I can appreciate Islamic school for. I didn't get caught up in those things.
I also feel like hijab was so much easier to put on, because can you imagine like you're surrounded by a bunch of people that aren't close to their deen, or like aren't Muslim at all, and then one year you just show up with a hijab on, and you have to keep it on, and you have to like abide by the rules of it and like represent it right. That would have been so hard to do as like a 6th grader or a 7th grader, but because we put it on like during Islamic school and everybody wore it, you kind of just blended in, and so it didn't matter what your insecurity was, it didn't matter if you felt comfortable in it yet or not. Like, we just kind of had it on, and then once we were secure with it, we entered public high school. So I guess that was like the good time for us to go to Islamic school. I just feel like it, obviously we talked about feeling out of place or like you don't belong, but like it is so prominent, evident if you just don't belong to that culture. Like, I feel like even if you are a person of color, but you've lived in Canada for like forever, you still live by the Canadian culture. So kids that were like more fresh to the culture, I remember like kids that were in ESL, or kids like me that had just joined and like was still learning and whatnot, teachers didn't have that kind of like nurturing patience with us. I remember, like, in kindergarten, my teacher would get frustrated when I couldn't read, because she'd be like, oh my god, like, the rest of the class is already reading and, like, you're not reading yet. And for me, it was difficult because I was first learning the language, and then on top of that, I'm starting to read, like, as a 4-year-old, 5-year-old. And so I always felt like, oh my god, like, I'm stressing her out, or I'm making her feel like she has to do more in her job, when in reality, like, that's your job. You're supposed to make me feel comfortable in reading, and if I'm the last one to start reading in the class, that's because, you know, I'm new to the language. It's not to do with, like, anything else. But then the more you grow up and the more you practice your culture at school, the more they kind of push it out. Like, for example, in Ramadan, if I were to fast, I remember grade 5, I fasted for, like, that was my first Ramadan where I fully fasted, and the teachers, so Ramadan at that time was around summertime.
Yeah, it was, so like, right before summer started.
Exactly. So it was really hot outside. They bring ice cream for everybody, and I would always, like, just decline. And then one of my teachers in grade 5 was like, he was like, why aren't you eating? And I was like, it's Ramadan, like, I can't eat. And he's like, it's fine, like, just take it, just eat it, and then when you get home, like, fast the rest of the day. And at that point I was genuinely questioning whether I should take like, you're giving ice cream to a little kid. Yeah. So I was like, should I just take it and eat it? Like, who's gonna know? And he was just kind of like, just take it. Like, he really undermined it. Then I was like, no, I just don't want to, like, you know, not commit to something. And now, looking back, I'm like, I know how wrong that is, because you know my religion, and you know that I'm sticking by it, and you know it's already hard enough for me to look around and see the whole class eating ice cream.
Especially as a little kid, yeah.
And then you're gonna be like, just eat it, like, you're not respecting me or my religion, you know?
Alhamdulillah, like, as I have not had a explicitly, like, racist encounter with a teacher, I feel like for me, a lot of teachers were curious about, like, why I was fasting. It's like, I remember I was fasting in grade 5 too, and my teachers would kind of just ask, like, oh, like, is, like, what is the reason that you guys fast? How does it work? You know, like, what are the rulings around it? And even with, like, accommodations, like, even in high school, like, our Jummah prayers are either, like, during lunch in the winter, or they're after school when the timings go, like, past, like, 12:30 and stuff. And we, even, like, this year, teachers were like, oh, before Eid, we will finish all of your assessments so that after Eid you guys have some time, because I know you guys are going to study during Eid. Like, I feel like teachers were accommodating to a sense.
Really? Because in my school, I feel like they didn't. In my school, obviously this ties in with, like, the student body, but they'd be very fishy about us leaving class for Jama'ah prayer. They'd be like, very on top of it, and, like, if you didn't come back at a certain time, it was like, no, did you really go pray? Or, like, things like, I remember tests on Eid, or, like, you'd be like, can I get an extension? Like, they're like, Eid is 3 days, like, it's just 1 day, like, don't show up that day. Or even, like, they'd fully be like, oh, you know what, tomorrow is Eid, so we're not going to take any, like, lessons in class, most of the kids are not going to be here, but, like, you still have homework due and whatnot. So it's like, I get it, we went to different high schools, so it's probably different. Your school's like majority Muslim, so nobody would even show up on Eid. But for me, it was like, the minority have Eid, but you still have something due. It's like, why don't we get that same treatment as Christmas or any other religious holiday, you know?
I feel like for us, my school especially has been very accepting and kind of, like, welcoming to, especially, like, Muslims. Like, we have, like, school iftars and stuff. Teachers who are, like, not even Muslim, right? Teachers who are, like, East Asian, teachers who are Christian, teachers who may not even be practicing of any religion will show up to kind of just support the cause and just to have fun and enjoy. I feel like my school has been kind of, like, really welcoming with that, but it's especially with the area that I live in, at least, where we have so many immigrants and so many new people, and everyone just kind of, like, supports each other. I feel like,
I know that your school did, like, tarawih, like, after school, but it had nothing to do with the school. Like, it was just, like, they used the gym of the school. But was it always like that, or is it now changing? Because even now I look back and my school has an MSA. The school that was predominantly white now has an MSA club, and I'm like, where was this 4 years ago? But is that because, like, the GTA has been taken over, or?
I really don't know if it's been like that. I guess I never really paid attention to it that much, especially because COVID took out so much of my high school experience. But I feel like it has been quite accommodating, especially because my brothers went to the same school before me, and they would like they'd obviously tell me like, oh yeah, like I went to drama, I had drama, so I can't pick you up or something like that. I feel like they have been accommodating to a sense. I haven't had any, again, like I haven't had any explicit racist encounters with teachers or even students.
I feel like in terms of racist like experiences in high school, it was more ignorance. Like for me, it was definitely that ignorance, or for you, like you said, curiosity. But like in your school, again, you don't need it. Like in my school, I remember around the whole like Palestine, like the whole Palestine thing was happening during COVID. Our teacher would do like a daily check-in in the morning, and a lot of the kids were saying how they felt uncomfortable because like the whole Palestine thing was erupting around that time. And he had basically said word for word and was like, you know what, let's just leave like those issues there and like just focus on our issues here. Basically saying like, leave your culture behind, leave your people behind, and focus on you here in Canada. And I remember arguing with him and being like, okay, but that's where we come from, you know? Like, you can't say we can't feel anything for the people back home because we live here.
Especially if you have family.
Yeah.
Like, you may have left, but your roots, your family, that's the dirt you're made of, you know?
Yeah. And, like, that was, you know, that's a white teacher. Or even, like, gym classes. You have Ramadan and, you know, you're in gym class and your teacher gives you no type of mercy and is like, no, it's not my issue that you don't want to drink water, whatever. That's it's not racist, but it's also just like you're ignorant because you can't just say like, drink water. Fix your issue, drink water, you know?
Oh my goodness.
Or I have this girl in my university that was talking about how she's like from a tiny little town in like BC or somewhere really, really scarce in Canada.
Yeah.
And it's majority white people, and they said they had one Pakistani girl immigrate there this year, and that the teachers made her, like, as part of her school project, make a slideshow about Islam and basically just like teach the class about Islam. And it had nothing to do with any of the classes that she was taking, but they were just so curious as to why she was the only Muslim in the entire town. Her and her mom were the only hijabis. So it's like that kind of curiosity where it's like, but are you really going to grade somebody for how well they, like...
It becomes a thing where people of color have to advocate and, like, teach everyone else as if it's their job when it's really not their job.
Like, you can Google stuff if you want.
Again, for academia in Islamic schools versus public school, we got a lot of questions about that. One of the questions was, did teachers go above and beyond teaching the core subjects in Islamic schools? I personally felt like there were more opportunities within Islamic school. There was a lot of like science fairs and like there was this competition, Let's Talk Science. I know both me and I would participate in that, and there was a lot more sports opportunities too, because I feel like it was a lot smaller, so you had more chances of kind of getting into these sports teams. And their tournaments were bigger, right? Because all the Islamic schools would get together and have tournaments. So I guess it does kind of expand in that way. But teachers themselves with teaching the core subject, I felt like didn't really go that far. I didn't feel like it was engaging, such as like having the science fair was engaging. But compared to the regular like science class, regular science was not engaging. And be like, okay, here's a lesson, here's a worksheet, that's it. But when you're like 12, 13, you obviously want to do more, right? Because I get if you're teaching like high schoolers and stuff and they're going to university, but at that age, I feel like you should foster the curiosity and kind of show them a more creative and engaging side of the subject to kind of like push them further into like being inspired almost.
Yeah, I feel like, again, like you said, these opportunities, like Let's Talk Science and math fairs and spelling bees, that all engaged us way more than I feel like I felt in high school, because we didn't have many of those things in high school. And also, like you said, it's a smaller group, so it's easier to take them to an event like Let's Talk Science or Engineering Girls and stuff. But yeah, in terms of like actually teaching, it was kind of just like textbook stuff, but we had a lot of homework. Like, I don't know if you remember, but we had like crazy amounts of workload. We'd write essays in a week, we'd have tests every week. We had like this big workbook that we have to like chug around with our textbook. When teachers give out homework, like they give something from the textbook, a worksheet, something from the workbook. Like, we had a lot of homework for just one class, and I feel like that prepared us for university in a way, but at the same time it could have like such a drastic effect on your marks, to the point where you may not even get into like a good university because of those workloads, you know? I feel like it's obviously it varies depending on the person. Like, if you felt like the workload was helpful, then you were gonna do better in university. And I feel like even when I went into public school and the workload was so much lighter and like classes were so much easier, I felt that stress. Like, grade 9, I don't remember a single thing I learned because I had already taken it in grade 8, but it was just not implemented the right way. Like, teaching was not implemented the right way, which is what you were talking about, like about just teaching the lesson, worksheet, that's it. But it was still like, I still feel like we still had a lot of work as 8th graders or 7th graders.
I feel like my experience was different than yours. I feel like we have a lot of differences within our experiences. My experience was different in the sense that our workload was not that heavy, and I feel like tests were quite easy, to the point when I got to high school, I was like, oh, like, I actually have to like do work. I feel like with Islamic school, again, with that lack of professionalism, you can get away with a lot more. You can be like, oh, like, sister, like, you know how it was, like, yesterday, like, my cousins came over, like, you know how it was, you know how it is, like, when your auntie says goodbye, like, 10 times, but she doesn't actually leave, like, you know, like, you can relate to them on a different level, so then it's easier to get away with stuff. Like, I remember, like, we were once doing, like, a history test in grade 8, and none of us, we were all struggling, because none of us had studied, and we're like, sister, please, like, just, you know, like, we're like your daughters, like, just let us make it open book. And she's like, okay, fine, you can take out your textbooks. So we took out our textbooks, and like, everyone was able to like answer the question and get away with it. Like, if you were to really convince a teacher like that in high school, like, you wouldn't be able to. Yeah. So again, like, I guess it's different, you know, but I feel like teachers did not go above and beyond with teaching the core subjects. And then another question that we received was, do you consider yourself more knowledgeable and skilled than other kids in public school?
I would say experience-wise, yes. And like I mentioned before, like, when I first entered high school, I felt like the workload was so easy. So in that sense, yes, I felt like I was already used to a higher workload. I was used to more complicated subjects. I did like grade 10 math in grade 8, so that to me was like, it was just revision. All of it was revision, until it got to a point where I was like, okay, grade 11 is such a big jump from grade 10 to grade 11. That's where I felt like I was at the same level as other people. But in terms of experiences, yeah, like, we did a lot more, and we fit a lot more into our tiny little schedules in Islamic school than I feel like high school or public school would, including the fact that we had like 3 extra subjects, which was Arabic, Quran, and Islamic studies. So fitting that into, you know, your schedule, and that workload on top of everything else, you know, memorizing and doing Islamic history and doing you know, learning a new language, all that, it adds on. So when you take that away, it's easier for you to like adjust. What about you?
I feel like there's different skills I learned through the competitions and opportunities we had, right? Like, through the science fair, like, I was able to I really truly enjoy the science fair because I was able to explore science in a way that I found interesting, and I had almost full control,
Mm-hmm.
and I was able to explore my findings with other people, right? I felt like a true scientist,
Yeah.
women in STEM. And then even when, like, let's talk science, right? Like, that competitiveness and all of that, I felt like we developed skills so differently in, like, spelling bees, right? Like, all of that, it was like you kind of get the grasp of how to prepare for these big competitions and stuff. But then when you're like, okay, how do I prepare for a test? That's where I felt like I kind of lost the grips.
Yeah. Because a test to us was not as deep. Like, for some reason, for us, a test was something that you did. Like you said, we had so many open book tests. There would be so many times where, like, teacher, tomorrow, please, sister, please. And she'd be like, okay, fine. Like, it was a lot more lenient. And even with exams, like, they'd give us a whole big, long, like, chunky chapter book on just, like, questions you could do to prepare for the exam, and most of those questions were on the exam. Like,
I never had exams in Islamic school. I didn't have exams up until high school. Like, high school I started doing exams.
No, we had exams, and that's what was weird to me at first, because it's like, why do I have a midterm exam in grade 6? Like, we had midterms
and finals,
and we had EQAOs. Like, we had all of that.
We didn't even do EQAO.
What was your school doing?
I don't know. We didn't do EQAO or exams.
No, we definitely had exams. So I guess that's the difference between.
Yeah. Like, even like two like Islamic schools within the same like city can be so different. And they weren't even that far from each other. I think it's
like what you said last episode about how your school was like just up and running. Like, they barely.
I don't know. They were just starting to figure out how to run the place. I wonder if
they have exams now.
I have no idea. I don't keep in touch with anyone from there now. Yeah. The economic aspect, would you say that it is worth the money?
The money, yeah. At that time, I feel like it was worth the money, and I needed it. That experience, or having that, like, having Muslim friends, having a Muslim community, it's so priceless. And feeling like you're all one big family, that is so priceless. Now they've jacked up prices for
especially with inflation, with the state of this economy.
Like, let's talk about it for real. But now I feel like it's not. The only thing that I would say is, like, if we're paying that much for a school, at least let it be a little more, like, put together, in terms of building wise, in terms of, like, teachers. But other than that, I feel like it was worth the money, just because you can't find that anywhere here. You can't, as much as you want to say you can go to the masjid and just, like, have a Muslim community there. At that age, you need other 12-year-olds that look just like you and from the same background as you to understand what you're going through. Like, to go to the masjid and find that, it's a bit harder to do, So when you're taking classes with people that are just your age and girls that are your age from the same background, it makes you feel more comfortable, and it definitely made me feel more comfortable in my identity as, like, a Muslim woman.
For me, I feel like this is, again, there's, like, pros and cons, right? I feel like, again, like, with relating to people, I feel like that was definitely, like, a good aspect of it, where it was worth the money. And then also that aspect of, okay, you're sending your kid here, right, for, like, 6 to 8 hours a day, right? And that's, like, if they're not involved in, like, school events and, like, teams and all of that, then they're spending even more time with these people. So in that sense, I did feel like it affirmed my identity to a point, which I would say, again, is worth it, because I didn't have to worry about lifestyle differences. The way I'm living my life is probably very similar to the way my classmate is living their life, because their parents have very similar values and backgrounds to my parents. So that similarity, it definitely does kind of help you in kind of figuring out who you are.
But I also feel like there was so much similarity, but so much diversity as well. Like, it wasn't just a class full of kids all from, like, Iraq. Like, I remember we'd have, like, Somali kids in our class, and we'd have, like, converts. We had, like, one convert. We had Pakistani kids, and we had Arab kids. So when we had, like, International Day, and when we had, like, potlucks and stuff, and everybody was bringing their ethnic food, like, we had differences, and we all wanted to learn about each other's cultures, but we were also the same in a way. And so that Muslim aspect, that, like, that
it
feeling
ties
of
you
unity,
together. Yeah.
It ties you together completely.
But then again, like, even like the parts that I would say that were kind of like iffy was like, as you said, if I'm paying that much money, I'm expecting a good quality education for my kid,
exactly.
which I guess was kind of lacking.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you're also like you give and take.
Yeah.
It's not going to be completely good and it's not going to be completely bad. There's like aspects to it that you're going to appreciate, but you know that you're also losing certain aspects as well.
Which is why I feel like the time frame that you go to Islamic school also, like, it's different. Because if I was going to high school and I was going to an Islamic school for high school, academia wise, it's not a smart move, you know? But if I'm going middle school or elementary school and I know that I want my kid to go to Islamic school because I don't really care about, like, their education from, like, grade 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. Like, that's not what's important at that age. It's more important, like, identity and community. Then it's going to benefit them, you know? But if you're sending your kid to Islamic school for academia, then it's just not the smartest move. Like, you need to know your intentions behind sending them there.
That's true. At the end of the day, Islamic school is different for everybody.
Yeah.
I know for me, again, as I said like many times in this episode, morals and values, it really affirmed them and it really affirmed my identity. Again, that's not the same for everyone.
Yeah.
I've seen people who have gone to Islamic school and have fallen into things that they may not have necessarily wanted to or liked to.
Yeah.
Right? But again, it's obviously very different. Our experiences do not speak for everyone's experiences because these are, again, our individual and unique experiences.
Yeah. Let us know what you guys want to hear from us, because we obviously want to make episodes accommodating to what people want to hear. This was definitely suggested because of our last episode. So if you still have suggestions or, like, topics that you want us to cover, make sure to, like, DM
reach out
us
to
or
us,
email us. Like,
even if you have just questions about anything that we have talked about, anything you want us to address, do reach out to us. Follow us at Shifa'a podcast on Instagram. We also do have a business email, shifa'business@gmail.com. Reach out to us.
Yeah, reach out to us, guys. And we'll see you guys next time, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.